Hello, everyone. Thank you for checking out this episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny, and I'm here with.
James Droucker.
Jesse Covner.
And you're both a part of the Sons of Singularity?
Droucker is a writer and has created parts of the Journal de Indochine, and I am a founding member and the partner of Sons of Singularity.
Excellent. And today we're going to talk about, and forgive me, my French is terrible, Journal de Indochine?
Oh, very good.
Okay, excellent. And now, so there are very interesting Call of Cthulhu books out there. And yours stands out because it takes place, well, during this time. It's called French Indochina, which is made up of Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, Laos. What is this book exactly?
Well, Journal de Indochine is a campaign resource for Call of Cthulhu so that you can run campaigns within French Indonesia during the time period of 1925 to 1954. And within it are a set of campaigns. A set of scenarios, not campaigns, but a set of scenarios that have different types of antagonists, different types of gameplay, and take place at different times during that time. And like our other products in the Asian horror line, it's fairly grounded in a historical time period where a lot of things are happening, where, in my opinion, a lot of the horror, most of the horror is really from what people are doing to each other and not necessarily the mythos. But we find that to be a fascinating setting, sort of like as what I wrote for the Sassoon Files before that. It's like you're on the Titanic and it's sinking, but there's a monster that's attacking you, which is more scary, the fact that you're going down the Titanic or there's a monster there. So, and we find there's a lot of interesting play styles, a lot of interesting things to do with a diverse cast of also pre-gens for players to use.
I am very impressed that you picked this region of the world to focus on. If I may ask, what made you decide to focus on this part of the world during this time?
I was always interested in this part of the world in general, and I was always amazed that this time period is. I'm American, by the way. I was always impressed that, interested in that. Not a lot of people from my country know about this time period in this part of the world. At the time when we were brainstorming for our next project, we had just completed the Sassoon Files, and we had completed Rational Magic, which was a game that I designed, and I think we were working on Camlin Chronicles, which is sort of an Arthurian Welsh for a 5e game campaign. We were talking about doing something in Vietnam, and the Ken Hite, what is it called again? I'm sorry, the downfall of Delta Green, as I said. Names
for Gumshoe, right?
Yeah, the fall of Delta Green.
Yes, I can see the cover in my head.
The fall, I could see it in my head too.
Yeah,
now, the name, which I know it was not coming in my head. The Fall of Delta Green had come out. We really like, me and my partner Jason Sheets really likes Ken Hite and Robin Laws. We play Gumshoe a lot. We play Trail of Cthulhu a lot. We have material also. We're working with Francis
Ackroyd.
We had done development work with him, and he had worked on a supplement to the Sassoon Files called The Brother of Jesus. And he had developed campaign material for Vietnam campaign. So we had a conversation. We thought, well, why don't we do something before the time period of Fall of Delta Green? We didn't want to feel like we're copying something that Ken Hite does. We wanted to be a little bit different, and we felt it would be weird. I don't think it would have been weird, but we felt it would be weird if we published something that takes place in the same time period, at the same time as them. So we thought, what about during the time of the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, which is when the French forces fell to the Viet Minh, and basically the Vietnam, at least North Vietnam, was liberated. And I had studied that in college, and it turned out that Francis's grandfather had flown missions for the French during that time, and has pictures of this and has stories to tell of this. And so that was sort of like, oh, well, we have also assets and we have firsthand knowledge of what Vietnam was like during that time. We have some connection there. And so it sort of came about that we decided on this project from that.
So this is two books, plus some additional extra material. I took a peek at it, and the amount of information in there is exhausting almost. There's like from cars to weapons of the time period to flowers and florals and things like that. And around that time, it's so much information in there. If I may ask, how long did it take you to put this together?
We started about 6 months before the Kickstarter. We started a little bit more than 6 months, and really we had the ideas maybe a year before the Kickstarter, and we started in about 6 months and started writing and play testing, and we really Francis and Patrick's another writer, Chandler. They and Jason wrote a lot of the scenarios. I think all the scenarios for the first book. Patrick and Francis really pushed us to do things on the Kickstarter that really propelled it more also, to be less conservative. And I'm usually much more conservative about how I structure things. That pushed the level of the Kickstarter up, and we decided, okay, we're going to need to do another book. And so that second book James wrote on was completed between the end of the Kickstarter last August and October. So we pushed hard to get that done as quickly as possible and play test it as we were making it.
Yeah.
And then got a series of different people to help edit and jam as a full-time effort to almost full-time effort to get the layout done. And then of course after that all this was during COVID, and our printers were delayed, and everything else in the world has been delayed. So it's been almost a year since the Kickstarter, and we're getting it out now. That was a little bit too long for how we like to publish things.
Well, thankfully, most of the backers have been really understanding about the situation. Yeah. I mean, like, how can you not be, really? I mean, given the way the world is today. So.
Okay. And what can you share us about the adventures that players may be going through? Can you give us like a couple of hints of what players may expect, investigators may expect?
Well, we have a lot of different types of adventures. The first adventure involves sort of to me is the most sort of Apocalypse Now type of adventure, in the sense of Heart of the Darkness, going out into a very purist type of adventure, going out into a plantation where things are not well, and struggling to eventually get out of that place. And that's fairly frightening too. Then we have an adventure taking place in a very militaristic style adventure against the Genyosha, which is a real life Japanese cult, a militaristic cult that existed at that time, and the Japanese had invaded Vietnam. To a adventure involving a lot more of finding clues and in the cities of Vietnam to track down a wayward priest. And then the last adventure of the first book. Sorry, that's not the last. The last adventure of the first book is an interesting adventure that takes place during a battle, and so it's a very militaristic battle, but the players can be either French forces, French Foreign Legion forces, or they can be Viet Minh forces, and the GM can run it as two separate tables at the same time, and have these two groups come head to head in the finale. And what they're doing is that they're working their way through an abandoned bunker that the Japanese had used for some during World War II that used for some nefarious experiments. So that is almost like a dungeon crawl, but it differentiates itself because it's a dungeon crawl that can be played with two opposing tables at the same time.
Yeah, it's very cool.
That's the first book, and then the second book. I should let James talk about his. His is my favorite because it's so different from everything else.
Well, it's because, like I said before, there was a lot of stuff that they were doing these military aspects, and quite accidentally too. I mean, they built a lot of adventures that were mostly focused on the French or visitors to Vietnam, and not the Vietnamese people as specifically. And again, I'm not saying that as an argument, and I'm not saying it to aggrandize myself, because I submitted 3 ideas, and the one that eventually got made was the one I whipped up in half an hour and gave to them and said, "Oh, make that." And it was about a bunch of Vietnamese sailors, and I think it was Jesse who had told me that they realized they didn't have any adventures that specifically focused on Vietnamese NPCs. So it's like they sort of talked to us, and we sort of need this adventure in the book. So, but mine is like I said, it's a lot less political, and it's more of it's a monster movie. I take my inspiration, a lot of it. If you'll read it, there's a lot of nods to Jaws in it, and stuff like that. And it's the kind of adventure that I would run for my players. I like those kind of boilerplate, suspense, action-y kind of just fun, cool, tone-based horror stories. And like I said, just a good monster movie with the whole backdrop of Cthulhu, and even some very specific mythos moments. Because mine takes place the day after, in the canon of Cthulhu, that Cthulhu was awoken for a brief moment in Riley, and then put back to sleep. And I sort of use that as a springboard for the events that occur within mine. Because my supposition is that, the psychic reverberations of what happens there will stretch all over the world, and this is how it's affecting this one small part of the world. And listen, I had a blast writing it, and I was very glad to be able to get the chance to write it. So,
I'd like to just add real quick. Actually, a lot of the scenarios have Vietnamese NPCs, and we have what are called player factions. So all the scenarios could also be run from a completely different faction, including the faction of the Viet Minh, including a faction of a Vietnamese real life gangster triad-like organization. But James's scenario, the players are fishermen. And that's what I like. And that's what they're Vietnamese. Getting back to an earlier question, I don't think that there's a difference between playing Vietnamese or Chinese or Americans. We're all people. There are some cultural norms that are different, right? But people have sort of like the same motivations. And and this is something that we had in Sassoon Files too. We want to minimize the idea that playing as different people is strange, or a different culture is exotic. This time period had a lot of strange and crazy things happening. But what I liked about James's scenario is that they're fishermen, and they're guys from a small town, and they all know each other, and that's I think that's sort of cool.
What is there any game masters or keepers tools in this book?
We have two that we use, and we use this in all of Sons of the Singularity books to a certain extent, and more, sort of our signature things, right? One is called lore sheet. Lore sheets are handouts. In Call of Cthulhu, lore sheets are handouts. They have a section, a little bit of history about something, and a little bit of a paragraph that connects a character to the history or a character to something. And this could be used as a side quest. It could be used as a contact. I think that's the Call of Cthulhu word, a contact within the game world that could be used as a resource. In Call of Cthulhu, lore sheets have also come with a bonus skills just to make people excited about getting them. This is sort of like the hook for people who care about numbers more. But our whole concept of lore sheet, and this concept actually comes from a game published by EOS Press called Weapons of the Gods, and then was used in a game called Legends of Leo Lin. The idea is that we have some background for the character that has a mechanical bonus or whatever property that's in it. And players often don't like to read a book before they come and play. So here we give out a little handout that gives a little piece of history about the world and connects their character to it if they choose to take the lore sheet. And so we use this to convey a lot of information and help players come to understand the setting that they're in and demystify it for them.
Yeah. And I think it also helps to give them a little bit of personal backstory in these tales as well. It's like your character knows this stuff about the world, and it just helps them get a little more involved and invested in it.
We also have a mechanic called counters, which is a little bit like clocks and Powered by the Apocalypse. It's something that we use especially for stealth missions. We have a lot of stealth, a lot of espionage in this in some of the scenarios. In some of the scenarios, the characters are members of the Office of Special Services, the forerunner to the forerunner that what came before the CIA. And the OSS were actually allies with the America in general, but the OSS, America through the OSS, were allies with the Viet Minh and had assisted Ho Chi Minh. And so characters on this OSS mission, that could be US, it could also be Vietnamese characters going to fight and do espionage against the Japanese, the Imperial Japanese forces. Well, with the counters, we keep track of background levels of risk, background levels of how the guards and the city police and various factions are responding, or if they're going to be looking for the players or not. And that's how one of the things tools that we're adding for the espionage aspect of gameplay that is in several of the scenarios.
So the technical aspects of the books. Do you mind sharing how many pages, what chapters do you have, and things like that?
Sure. So the first book is 228 pages. There's the introduction, there's the background information. There are 4 scenarios. Each book has 4 scenarios in it. Each book has at least, I think each scenario has at least 5 pre-gens. And in book 1, there's actually the last scenario, which takes place during the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, where you could be the French side or the Viet Minh side going through this sort of dungeon crawl. That's technically 2 scenarios, or sort of like 1.5 extra scenarios in that. So there are pre-gens, Viet Minh pre-gens for that as well. There are the factions.
There's the OSS. There's the Bien Xuyen, the crime faction, the Viet Minh, and service, the SDECE, the Service de Documentation Extérieure de Contre-Espionnage. So that's the service of documentation. That's a mouthful with my very good French diction. So yeah, a bunch of different factions. So I think we've all built at least from the part of my scenario, you can create your own characters and run them within it. And having all of these different factions gives you interesting options on who you want to create and who you want to plug into these scenarios too. So
these are player factions. These are factions meant for the players to, if the GM wants to say, okay, we're going to run this, but we're not going to run it according to the things strictly in the scenario. Instead, we're going to take this scenario, this faction, and take characters from this faction, put it into the same scenario. You could actually rerun the scenario multiple times with different factions to see it from different angles.
Well, this is very exciting. I took a peek inside, and it's amazing how much you packed in there. There's a lot of stuff happening there, and I think any Call of Cthulhu fan should be excited about these books.
The editorial team did a fantastic job dropping that stuff. I wrote one scenario, but I marvel every time I look at this. The like you said, the sheer breadth of information and stuff that people can use to create their own scenarios if they wanted with this set of books is just spectacular.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you about these books that you would like to share or talk about?
I think that it is important to say that both of these books are not mythos focused in Cthulhu. There are monsters, there are forces from other dimensions that are unspeakable, but all of this is happening in a backdrop of different of nations at war, people trying to throw off colonialism, different factions trying to take control, different factions with the same goals fighting with each other, different religious groups that many people in America probably haven't heard of coming down on one side or another. So there's that, and we're going to be continuing the Asian horror series. We're taking a break from it with the next Kickstarter, which will hopefully be in a few months, where we can go a little bit more on a piratey theme. And then in November, we're going to come back with another part of the Asian horror series.
Oh, excellent. I look forward to hearing more about this for both projects. But yes, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us and sharing about details about these amazing books. Again, the name of it is, let's see if I could do it again, Journal d'Indochine.
Very good.
If only my French teacher could see me now. So yes, thank you very much to our viewers. Thank you for watching. Stay safe out there. Get your shots. And be careful out there. It's a scary world. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.